Okay, that's me. Um, so cello. So I did a lot of classical music, and I was always into pop and electronics, and kind of had an old BBC Model B computer, and I got that to play music by looking at computer programs and working out what was going on. So I was a bit of a nerd. But when I was still at college, I joined a band. We signed a publishing deal with Rhythm King Music, which was where Bomb the Bass, NS Express, and those kind of big pop, early 90s, late 80s, kind of dance pop kind of began. That band didn't do anything. But while I was in that band, and this is what my kind of the theme is, I guess, is that while you're doing something, you might find something else that you're going to end up doing. So while you're doing stuff, you may think actually this is a total waste of time. But sometimes it's worth sticking out for a little bit longer because something might come in of interest that you might want to kind of get involved with. So by being a band member, I then started to meet record producers, and they got me in to do a session for another band, a cello session. And that was a band called the Auteurs, who were mid-table indie of the 90s in the UK, kind of a bit like Suede, but we were kind of slightly below Suede, to the left of Blur, to the right of Pulp, or whatever. So I did that for a lot of the 90s. We made 4 albums on Virgin, and during that time I kind of honed various different skills. So I got hold of, in the latter years, I got hold of Pro Tools. I had been using Cubase and MIDI sequencing and multi-tracks, like Porter Studios. But I got my first DAW, and they weren't called that back then. They were basically called Pro Tools, because it was the only one that recorded audio onto hard drive, onto hard disk. So I got a very early version, I was on version 4 actually, and it was an 8 voice only. So you could only have 8 audio tracks. It's basically like a digital 8-track, but running on the laptop. I also did string arrangements. So within the band, I did the string arrangements. We did a couple of string sessions. And then I started to do string arranging for other people. Like I did Snow Patrol Big Hits, and I did a track with U2, and Editors, Block Party, people like that. I did about that. And then I'd always kind of been writing songs, but in the Auteurs I didn't write anything. It was just one rather bossy lead singer who wrote everything, who was extremely grumpy, but that's another story. So then so as I kind of finished, the band was kind of coming to an end in around 99, 2000, and I decided to become a professional programmer. So I also bought Logic at that time. I'd used Cubase as a MIDI sequencer, but yeah, so I bought Logic, learned Logic and Pro Tools, and went out as a hired guy I used to wheel my Pro Tools rig in and plug it in, and it was still mostly recording to multi-track 2-inch. But what used to happen is they used to offload the drums to me, and I'd go through it and edit and time the drums. And also I did a lot of vocal work, so vocal comping, vocal tuning, all that kind of stuff. I was kind of brought in to do that. And keyboard programming as well, so like doing drum beats and playing keys, and because I'm a keyboard player as well as such. And I also got into starting to write music for kind of TV and commercials. Did a couple of theme tunes, and so on. So I will go to the next slide. So that was my first studio. It was a Roland D10 and an Alesis MMT8, which is that's a hardware sequencer, a MIDI sequencer. And all I really had at that stage to record audio on was a half-inch tape machine, or a quarter-inch tape machine, and an S1000. I used to record audio into S1000 and chop it up. And that's one of the early samplers, MIDI samplers. And that's the screen of Cubase version 6, I think, which was just MIDI. That's an old Apple, the old Apple typeface we used to hate and still do. So yeah, that's what the DAWs used to look like. Still got record and play. It's got your tracks. I mean, basically, it all comes from that kind of time. There was Notator by the people who ended up becoming Logic. Cubase remained Cubase. Pro Tools didn't have any MIDI in it until version 5. So Pro Tools, in its first, was it's basically like a hard disk recorder, which you could edit using the screen. So that's me in a band, and me in another band, and me in another band. And that's my studio now, which is in a village house out near Clearwater Bay, Silverstrand, Hanghau, that area. And, various bits that I've collected over the years. I basically run Pro Tools and Ableton. And, yeah, that's it as far as the software goes. And I've got a couple of hardware sequencers and synths and stuff. I bought that the other day, the far right. It's an SH02. I bought it upstairs from Steve. I was there knocking on the door as he was selling it. Okay, so that's kind of a very brief career in music, and that's kind of where. And what I do now is, since I've been in Hong Kong, I set up a company that writes music for TV commercials and television and media, I guess, and that's mostly that's about 50% of my time doing that kind of thing. And my other 50% of my time is basically writing. Well, no, I've got about 150% time. Okay, so 150%. Yeah, the other 50% is doing library music, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, and the other, wherever the space can be, is doing Blood, Wine or Honey. So we work and we write when we can. We all have other things we need to do, but it is the struggle that most people making creative work have anyway, is that having enough time to do the thing you really like but you still need to pay the bills. So I like basically what I do, but I like some things more than others. So. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about copyright, which is really dull, and but I think it's a thing that people kind of miss out when they're writing stuff and when they're understanding what they're doing. So basically, you write a track or a beat or a song or a whatever, and what you're creating are two things. You're creating a recording and you're creating a song. So, a composition. When you're doing this yourself, you're creating both at the same time, and they have basically one entity. But someone could come along and go, I really like your song, but I want to do my own version. So that basically the composition part of that, they use that. It's not a remix. They do another cover. It's like doing a Beatles cover version. The Beatles still wrote the song, but you recorded it. So that's the split. So the two things you're creating a recording or a master, and you're creating a composition or a song. What have I said here? So yeah, the owners of the recording are you, to start with, or forever, a record company, or a combination of everything. You can license to record companies. You can. But this is the recording half. So this is the actual, what would have been a physical record, the thing on the record, the recording. And this, you can basically get income from direct sales, the record company selling, licensing that recording to TV and film. And I've got my specific experiences in the UK, and I'm a member of PPL, which is the Phonographic Performance Limited. And you can be a member of PPL as a record company, or as an individual. So as an individual performer. So when I perform on other people's records, so for instance, the Snow Patrol records that I've done, I was the conductor on String Arrange, and the conductor gets a performance royalty when it's broadcast on the radio or on TV. So even though I didn't write a song or anything, I still get a royalty from those radio performances or TV performances. And the other half of the equation is the composition, which is you again. Or if you're doing a cover version, it's the cover version composers. And then basically you own that, or you can sign that off to a publishing company, or you can do a deal with a publishing company. They collect and they give you a royalty. That's the publishing side. Again, the same income streams really, direct sales. So that would be you selling on Bandcamp, because obviously you get all the money, or or uploading your music to one of the digital distributors like iTunes, or through iTunes, Spotify, all those. There is an income stream, and you'll get it. Then there's record company sales. So when the record company makes a physical product, so like a CD or a record or a tape, they pay the MCPS a license to use the song that is on that recording. And that license fee goes to the composers. So this, like, for say for an album, it's a percentage of the dealer price. So it's like, I don't know, it's probably about, if you've written one song on a 12-track record, you're probably getting about 10%. No, 5% of the record goes to the publishing. I think something like that anyway. You can also license to TV and film, and you can license. Often, what happens is if you're owning the recording, you license both sides of this at the same time. So if it's your track, and Cathay Pacific want to come and use it at the Rugby Sevens, they say we're going to pay the label this and the publishing this, and they're normally the same price, but basically it's two lumps of money. If you own it all, you just give them a package price for both sides. But if you're having to negotiate with a third party, a few years ago I licensed Gym Class Heroes featuring Ryan Tedder for the Rugby Sevens advert, and it took flipping ages. I won't swear because it's live stream. It took really a long time. There were 4 publishers involved in that song. There was one record company, which was Warner's, I believe, but the publishing side was Universal and Cobalt and EMI, I think. And you had to deal with it. You had to negotiate the percentage of the writer, and basically it was like what they call is most favored nation status. So the person who negotiated hardest basically negotiated for everyone. So as soon as the publishing side went up, the record side went up. So there was one publisher who played hardball, and everyone got paid more, which everyone's happy about, I guess, apart from the client who I was negotiating for. So anyway, I brokered that deal, and then did the kind of the stadium mix, which is also quite funny because it's in mono at the stadium. It was then in mono, but coming out of 25 speakers. We went and did a test in the stadium and stood in the stadium and went, okay, well, I need to turn the bass up, that kind of thing. Go and check the monitors. Anyway, so that's copyright. Production, and yes, you can.
In terms of performing rights, I think some people, there's a reticence to follow it up because of their ability to actually capture your royalties. So can you comment on that subject?
Well, I have my experiences with PRS. I've not worked with Cash, who are the Hong Kong equivalent. They're Performing Rights Society. So as a composer, you sign to them as a composer or a writer, or author, however you want to call it. PRS do a pretty good job, but they do a very good job, actually. I mean, I'm generally happy with PRS, but they are reliant on third territory reporting a lot of the time. And I have a very specific experience with Cash not giving PRS money, despite it being I've had broadcast ads in Hong Kong that haven't made it to my royalty statement. And I know they definitely would have paid up because TVB pay Cash. But the problem is it's often a long chain of registration. I mean, the PRS website is a little bit of a dog when you're trying to kind of go through it and work out, even if your own track is registered, I mean, I tend to do my own registrations because I'm not published at the moment, but there's stuff that was published previously by other publishers, and you look at it and you go, nah, that's not right. That wasn't the split. And you also see stuff coming. You do see stuff coming up in your royalties occasionally where you think, well, that's not even my track. But it's normally like pence, because then it's like a name of a demo that you did that you registered for no apparent reason, and the demo comes up on your royalty statement as being played in South Africa. I don't know. Anyway, but generally I think they do a really good job. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy with my experience of Performing Rights Societies. Basically, it's what I live on. That and PPL. That's my back end money. Production library music. So this is music specifically written for TV media productions, or even events. It's music that has a very specific purpose in mind when you write it, and it's basically a cheaper option. and easy to license. It's basically cheaper than getting a composer to write you something. I'll talk about a slightly different kind of deal you can do regarding that, but basically you search through ultimately millions of tracks, and you're looking for genres specific for your purpose, and you can download and audition them with your film, and a lot of it ends up in Channel 4 and Channel 5 in the UK. A lot of the stuff you hear in general Netflix stuff is library music that's been licensed. There's a lot of, and also a lot of the libraries have deals with people like YouTube. A part of the, I don't know whether you've been upload your own content and you want to put music on it. There are built-in libraries in those services which are licensed from, basically licensed publishing from production music libraries. You have to grant them the whole life of everything forever, mainly because if they had to administer short licenses and then go back to the client and go, oh, actually that license run out, we need another fee, it doesn't make any sense. It makes it really easy for the film or TV production company to know that I've got this music and I've got it for whatever I want it for. So you pay different rates for TV or advertising or film or background music on a website or whatever. There's different rates. And those uses have different charges, but normally it's world and forever. They own music. What makes it very easy as well for music libraries is they own both sides. From that previous slide where there were two halves, they own both halves. So when you're doing an album for a library, you're assigning both the recording and the composition side to them, and then they just have one license fee which covers that. And then you get royalties when it's on broadcast, when it's broadcast on places which play royalties, because not everywhere does. And its standard is 50% of the income stream, so you get 50% of what they receive. And when you go to the websites or when you're looking through them, there's a lot of if you're looking for like banging Swedish house, there'll be a banging Swedish house album for you out there. Yeah.
On that, so when record labels want to monetize their assets, that can get quite complicated, I guess, when you talk about publishing and recording, to try and pass it over to a library, even if the artist agrees.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a what you can sometimes some record labels, what they do is they talk to the writer or the artist, and they rename and they basically rename tracks. So they become library under a different name. So I know that Mr. Scruff has got tons of library music, which isn't Mr. Scruff. It's something else. I can't remember. But there's a label called Low Recordings, and they have a library arm which work with Bruton, which is part of Universal. And they specifically came to me and my mate who did. It was in a band with called Dada Hack, and said, any of your tracks not signed, or if they are, do you want to do them and rename them and just put them in the library? So that can work. The thing to think about if you are talking to libraries ever and getting stuff commissioned is you have to putting stuff in a library is meaningless unless the library's working hard on getting sync or getting it into shows for you. So really it's about how hard they work. And how desirable the music they're creating. So I've got stuff in Universal and some in EMI and some in Audio Network, and that's like just up there is like a little search in Audio Network, which pops up with all the tracks that I've done for them. What's nice about I'm going to go through the commissioning process, which is there. So this is the way it works with us and Audio Network. Me and my partner Pete, who's based in Sweden, we write these albums together. So you get a brief, or you pitch an idea to them. You go, I've got an idea for. I'll play you one of these tracks in a bit. Creepy horror score, like modern classical creepy horror score. So they go, okay, what's that going to sound like? So. You do have a demo. Well, they like the idea generally, or they come to you and go, "We want stuff for Asian cookery shows," We're always getting asked for Asian cookery shows. We need music for Asian cookery shows. So you go, okay, Asian cookery shows. So you do a lot of you do research, and so we went. We've got an album which is it's not out yet, but which is aimed at that, or Asian lifestyle with an Asian twist. You know, it's really generic stuff in a way, but it does get used a lot. And really, that's the other thing with you want to make records that people are going to use, not ones that you necessarily think are the best record ever. Yeah. Hopefully, you're making those two things at the same time. But so you give them some demos, they have a listen to them, and they go, yeah, fine. What's it going to cost? We're going to do like 7 or 8 tracks. And what do you need to make this recording? So Audio Network tend to have a budget, which means that they can give you money to record real instruments. So we tend to have an ensemble, small or big, or just individual players, maybe 4 or 5 players. We did a kind of 70s blaxploitation album, which we used bass, guitar, small brass section, and violins. I'll play you one of those tracks in a bit. And this is Abbey Road. It's Abbey Road. So occasionally, or quite a lot, in fact, the Abbey Road's biggest client is Audio Network. They book Abbey Road 2, which is the Beatles studio, for about 4 months of the year. Just block it out and record orchestra. So they have the London Session Orchestra, and that's what was going on there. So one of the albums we did, we went to London and went to record it. To be honest, they didn't pay me to go to London. They would have recorded it without me and got someone else to conduct it. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and do that. So we had I think it was a 30-piece string, 40-piece strings, and then brass and wind. And also a choir on one of the tracks. The choir we didn't go back and do because they did it on another session. Because basically they book like 9 hours of sessions, and then they have a wedge of music, which they're just recording. So we did like about half. We took about half of the string session, and they had another bunch of guys came in and did some other strings stuff. And that kind of, it's like a machine. So yeah, you record the tracks, you do editing and mixing, and then we basically send them some mixes of where we're at, what it's sounding like, and they'll give some notes or maybe not, depending on how it's going, like any old approval process, to be honest, with any client. And then once you've got your final mixes approved, we do versioning, which is a bit like stems, but it's not stems. It's like a version. Slightly stem it, or maybe there's some really nice keyboards that you can't hear, so we do like a keyboards only mix. And then cut downs, which are 60 seconds, 30 seconds for kind of commercials and TV titles. And then stings. We normally do 3 or 4 stings, which are like anything between 3 and 10 seconds, depending on what's going on. So I'm gonna stings like poo. That kind of thing. Exactly like that. They all sound like that. Okay, I've lost. I don't think that matters actually, because I'm just going to play a track. Hold on a second. Let me just see if I can get the screen. It doesn't matter. Okay, so this is one of the tracks that was recorded in. This is just the 1-minute version of a track recorded in Abbey Road. No, but no audio. Okay, hold on. There we go. Thanks. So this is the next thing is I guess Chinese drama, historical epic was our vibe. And this is designed to be used for Western documentaries, like so English language documentaries about China. But we recorded it with a Hong Kong Chinese orchestra session at a time, but in one of the studios. This is the 70s, I guess, inspired. I'm not saying it's inspired, I'm inspired by. So most of this is live. Actually, the breaks, obviously live break, but it's a drum break. But guitar, keys, brass. This is not delivered yet, but it's approved. And this is our creepy horror score thing. I don't know. So we recorded this in Hong Kong. This was with members of the Hong Kong Philharmonic Orchestra. 9-piece plus double bass. So 5-2-2, 5 violins, 2 violas, 2 cellos, and 1 double bass. We did the double bass separately because you couldn't fit him in the room. But also that, in this context, makes it easier to mix because there'll be a version you want to do without the bass in. So if you do the bass separately, it makes sense. And this was written, I basically wrote most of this through chopping samples out of things like Schoenberg, Berg, Bartok. So basically built like this is Bartok. But it's a section, 1 bar, Bartok, repeated. So that's how I put that together. No, I only use composers' art in copyright. 75 years after death, you're safe. Yeah. so that's one more slide. Oh yeah, okay. You know those, anyone know those TV shows? Maybe. Anyway, they're all library tracks originally. Iconic BBC and Monday Night Football in the US. They started off as library tunes, and they still are library tunes. But they're famous theme tunes. And there's bound to be Hong Kong equivalents, but I don't know. So, okay, quick Blood, Wine and Honey recap. It's a project I do with Joe and Shane. That's Shane, that's Joe. You'll see them when you see them. You'll recognise them. They walk around like this. I think we've been playing together about 4 years or so. We met here in Hong Kong. It started off as a kind of jam session-y type thing, and then I said, why don't we start recording? So we started recording what we were doing and building tracks out of jams. The album was out last year. Our first EP lead track, Anxious Party People, was nominated Track of the Year by Giles Peterson for the Worldwide Awards. We came 4th on the public vote, mostly because we spammed it. We didn't spam it as much as whoever won it. And then we self-released that first 2 singles, and then licensed and also licensed a track to Brownswood, licensed the album to Do Right, and then we've recently had a track on Pussyfoot, which is Howie B's label, another track we've licensed to them, and a track we've done a remix for On the Corner, and we've got a track coming up on the Corner EP in April, which it's called Verses, and it's basically the artist being remixed by other artists. So it's us being remixed by Hieroglyphic Being, and then that's me as a kind of pretend artist at the bottom, and I've DJed at all those places, including here, and I'm kind of putting together a record. So the idea is that I'm making a record of some sort. It started. I'm trying to convince one of my friends in London to rap on it, and they've never rapped, so I don't know whether they're going to. Yeah, so I don't know, what is my time like? How am I doing? Okay, cool, that's fine. Right, so I'm going to show Ableton again. Hooray for Ableton! Let's sit on this tiny chair. Yeah, maybe. So, I was billed as like, how to do a remix. This is not how to do a remix. This is how I did a remix. Basically, and a lot of what you're saying is true. Just, if you like it, do it. If you don't like it, don't do it. Or turn it off. So with something like this is a Blood, Wine and Honey track. And basically, at the top, I've got the stems. So that's the stems from the original mix from the original Blood, Wine and Honey track. So I can play that briefly, so you know what it's talking about. Oh man, oh man. mic, I guess. What I like about doing them is that you can find nuggets of stuff in the multi-tracks that are already playing, basically. So where I started with this, because that's me, I started with the cello. Because, yeah, it's sort of egotistical. It's always the best part. So I chopped a little bit of cello up. And I've been using, I'm going to get my notes out, because this is a thing called Magnetic, which is a third-party bit of software. So it's a bit like using a tape echo, like the Roland Space Echoes. It has a similar kind of, the way it feeds back, the way it, way it does stuff. And here, basically, I've automated this parameter. So basically, it's feedback nearly on, it's a lot, and basically it builds that kind of pulse. And then I chopped up some beats from the main beat. Nothing on that track. So no plugins, it's just what the stem was doing. No. Nearly. And then this is a Game Boy. I've got a Game Boy with it's a little cartridge called Nano Loop, and basically it's a very simple sequencer, and you can basically create 8-bit loops, sound loops, and little drum machines, and so that's in the original on the keyboard stem. And I think what I did here was monoed it. And Little Altar Boy. So Little Altar Boy, you will see it as I know it's a Sunday. It's not doing anything, so I don't know why it's on. Anyway, it's one of my favorite plugins. It'll be doing stuff on other tracks. It's a really shonky pitch shift, so it sounds kind of rubbish. And it's made by Sound Toys. Still not on the screen, but anyway, I'm just talking now. I'm looking. It looks great. Do you want to try unplug and plug in? I'm still seeing it, by the way. Okay, it's coming back. I can see the light glowing. So the bassist started off with these two things. From the original version, I went from 121, I think it is, down to 110. I was feeling in a 110 mood that day. I don't necessarily have a style, so I was just, whatever I was feeling was coming from it. Hello, there's the Little Altar Boy. So then, what I did was made a beat, which is basically a 909, classic 909 in factory settings with a little bit of tweaking. So that's the pattern, and it doesn't really change. There's other things coming in and out that give it its more of a vibe. Oh yeah, there's one thing that's quite nice. Can't really hear it on there, but what's nice about Ableton is that you can, say you've got a kit and it's got 20 drums or whatever in the kit, 10 drums. On this track, I'm inputting I've got my input set as the 909 kit, but I'm only bringing in the 909 kick drum into a reverb. So it's just a way of routing. You can route, that's everything you can route out of that drum machine on that, just down that side. So you can route any instrument, post pre-fader, and post insert as well, I think. So that's quite a nice way of like, rather than having to split stuff out all the time and put a new track in, you can just send to different things specifically. This percussion is just, that's from the original. Okay, let's look at the vocals. So what's going on here? This is a vocal stem. Okay, it's pitched up. It's pitched up 3 semitones. So then what, I didn't want the tune, I just wanted it to be like a monotone, so that's where little altar boy comes in. So it kind of gets more a bit kind of mantra, chanty, whatever. I think that was monoing, but because we're listening on speaker, you can't hear that. And then thin it all out. The decapitator is another Soundtoys plugin, which is basically a bit like an overdrive or a saturator. You can play it, if you press punish, it goes mental. And sometimes use it in punish. It's great for parallel processing drums. Someone mentioned that phrase earlier. Parallel processing drums. Send the drums to another track, put a massively loud distortion on it, turn it down, and just bring it in until you can hear it. It just makes everything fat with a PH. And then there's one last thing to make it even more confusing, which is meringue. Which is a plugin by Expert Sleepers, and it's basically, this is sort of reverse grain delay, and it just messes things about. And with a lot of these plugins like this, which I just fiddle until I like it, and that's just the way you can put presets in and then just mess. So I'm using very similar chain on the hand claps, and there's a reverse vocal. That was in the original stems. The bass synth. It's a built-in, what is it, operator? No, it's a sampler. This is something that I was trawling for a bass sound, and I quite liked it. Kind of like old school kind of vibes. And then next, I noticed you were doing it quite a lot on your session, ASJ. Side chaining is a thing that everyone does. And what's nice about Ableton is you can sidechain from anything else in the session. You don't need to. If you want to sidechain in Pro Tools, you have to create a bus and send to that bus, and then have that bus input on the sidechain, which is just old school because it's patching. It's like patching an old cable, but it's still in that vibe. But in Ableton, you switch on your sidechain. You can choose from any instrument to sidechain. Sidechaining basically is ducking. It's like a ducking compressor, and it helps keyboards and pads and stuff get out of the way of the kick. So when you want to make your kicks more punchy, don't turn your kick up. Just pump everything off the kick using a sidechain, and it'll get. Anyway, but don't listen to me. This is quite nice. I'm going to be very quick because I think it's nearly time. So this is the main drum stem. Going through everything. There's overdrive. Basically, that's the dry, just the kit with nothing on it. So what I wanted to do is catch the peaks and then compress it to make it louder. And then use this grain delay, which is a built-in plugin, which it has a... Turn that on so we can hear it. It has a delay, but also a pitch on the delay is basically pitching down, so it catches the peaks. Does that? And that's what's going on. And then there's a vocoded vocal. So again, the vocal stem. I ran it. I vocoded it with this plugin, which is in demo mode. So, because I haven't bought it. So the demo mode mutes itself every 10 seconds, and then this is what you can find. I mean, you can run things in demo. So what I did was I just recorded it several times until until none of it was muted, and then used that. It's on the ozone. Sometimes, when I'm running, particularly when I'm making demos and I want them to sound punchy, I'll chuck, where is it? Where have you gone? There you go. Ozone, which is an isotope plugin, which is like a multi-band, multi kind of mastering plugin. And it can be a little bit aggressive and a bit tempting to use too much, but it's handy when you're like, you just want stuff to just come up to reasonable listening levels. Because what I try to do when I'm making a track is keep a lot of headroom so that if I do add stuff, I don't have to keep pulling everything down. So leave headroom when you're making stuff, because then you can turn something up then, and you don't have to turn everything else down. And one last thing was this sound, which is in the stems. It's an audio track, which I pitched up 4 semitones from its original pitch, and that was built originally by another thing made by Isotope, Iris, and it's like automated feedback, I think it was, on a very strange sub-bass sound. So that kind of growling, and then the pitch up was all done with automation. That's going through a hell of a lot of stuff, like being bit crushed, overdriven. I don't think that's doing anything. No. Again, sidechained off the kick, and a compressor before the sidechain to iron out any peaks and then make it peaky again. I'll quickly play some of this track for you and then I'm done. Oh yeah, one last thing I'll look at when it goes past. It's this saxophone choir. So that's basically the same bit of audio. It's pitch shifted up an octave, up 6 semitones, and then down 4 semitones. So and that's just going through basically a ping pong delay, which is another plugin. There you go. Thank you for listening.